Hi everyone, I'm Joanne Armitage. I'm a lecturer in digital media at the University of Leeds. And this is Coral, who is a researcher at i-DAT in Plymouth that she'll talk more about in a minute when I let her speak. We're here to talk to you about Algorave and live coding, which is a scene or practice that we're involved in. But when we were talking before, we realised that both our work is very, in our regular day jobs, is very interested in immersion. My research is developing audio haptic systems for listening through the body. And Coral does lots of work with domes, so I'll let her introduce what she does quickly.
Yeah, so I'm currently doing my PhD at i-DAT, and I also lecture in digital and game design. And we work a lot with domes and immersive technologies, also playful use of data. So I run a VR IVT research group, and we use the dome a lot as a performance space. And I was really interested actually in some of this stuff that's been talked about recently, because part of the reason I got into Algorave is that I'm really into audiovisual as a direct collaboration. And I ran a lecture series with the Royal Academy of Music and the Bristol School of Animation, using the dome space and using sort of 3D sound as a way of having a shared language for starting kind of an AV process sort of together. So, brilliant.
We'll move back on to Algorave, which is a topic that's kind of weird to be talking about for me right now. 2 weeks ago, there was a large Guardian piece that we were both featured in, which received some very mixed opinions. And I've just come back from the 3rd International Conference on Live Coding in Mexico. So excuse any fuzziness you might feel from me. Some minor jet lag still in coming out of my system. So live coding as an immersive process really connects with this idea that Fred was kind of raising around these sort of tactile cultures of vinyl. And we can see in the kind of main hall a lot of these really open, handmade devices, people assembling found objects, like the acoustic projects, and turning them into something sounding. It's a process of unmaking, remaking, and reconfiguring what we know into sonic environments. And one thing that was a bit of a misconception I felt in the Guardian comments was the idea that we think we're doing something new. We often talk about how live coding as a practice is actually quite a Luddite movement. We're not using beautiful GUIs, and we can't really be bothered to make them. We're stripping away interface and working directly with code in chaotic ways. So when we're talking about live coding, we're talking about this idea of exploring algorithmic processes on stage. We're thinking about how we can share our algorithms and how they can add a sense of liveness into what we're doing, which is, again, a contentious issue. So at the first live coding conference in 2015, which was in Leeds, where I live, we asked live coders to try and define what is live coding. And that's something that we still quite haven't worked out. It's a multimedia practice, and you'll hear me. I work with sound. I'm a computer musician, and Coral is a visualist, so working with graphics and motion and things that I don't really know much about, but I enjoy. So I'm just pointing to some resources on live coding here. So we have TopLap, which is the not-so-temporary organisation for the promotion of live audiovisual programming. The acronym is in different forms sometimes on the website, depending on... So this is a place where you can find lots of information about live coding activities and what's going on. Here are some languages that you commonly see, particularly in the UK. I think it's probably useful to mention at this juncture that the UK is really a centre for live coding activity, particularly in the north, in Yorkshire. If we're going to really zoom down, there's lots of weird stuff going on. But the other centre is Mexico, where I've just come back from. So it's an interesting, worldwide, and Tokyo as well, worldwide scene. So I'm going to let Coral speak about visuals and live coding visuals.
Yeah, so I've got a mic.
You've got a mic.
Part of sort of creating, I guess, an immersive scene in a club night in an Algorave is that for an audio performance, generally sort of collaborating with a visualist. Visualist, I think in this picture is Chaz, maybe Dan Hatt, myself, also Antonio Roberts, who I think has had some work in here. I guess we're sort of the main group of people working in visuals at the moment. And what you'll find out of all of us is none of us are what you would call a VJ. None of us have come from that background. We're all generally new media artists. And what's really interesting about Algorave is that thing about stripping back what you're doing, showing what you're doing, and also that idea of being able to collaborate very directly with a musician because you're both starting from a blank page. You're both starting that coding process together. So the whole kind of journey is a journey you take together and you sort of, I guess, feed off each other to create that immersive environment.
Brilliant. So we've mentioned Algorave, but Algorave is basically a place to live code. It's normally music that's vaguely danceable, depending on the number of crashes that performers have, which happens, but less and less so. Systems are becoming more stable. It's really boring. So there's been the odd Algorave in London. There's regular Algoraves in Sheffield. And this is just a time for live coders to come together and make algorithms into music and visuals. And I guess it's quite an immersive experience. You can see in the photo on the left that we've got this code up, and we were using translucent material, and I think we had about 6 projectors running of different code and different spaces. So people had to like kind of move through the material to enter the space. So Algorave is an international problem. There are Algoraves across the world. I'm trying to think when the next there's an Algorave in Sheffield next weekend. Not so exotic, woo! But I mean, and then I think there's one coming up in New York and something about San Francisco I saw on our chat. So we're getting around a bit. We're hoping to do a big trip to Japan next year. And it's also got a kind of dodgy amount of press at the moment, which we're still unpacking and questioning very insecurely what we're doing. I can't tell you how uncomfortable it is to find an image of yourself next to the question of, is Algorave the future of dance music? I sure as hell hope not. So I've mentioned before, Algorave is political in the sense of its questioning ideas of literacy around technological interfaces. It's trying to instill a sense of opacity, but there's still tensions of literacy within that. What does the code mean if you can't read it or you're unfamiliar with it? And trying to unpack the idea of black boxing, so where our technologies are so fixed and determined, and it's very hard to break into and crack into and explore in more depth as to what they do. And this is something I talk about a lot with my students. I make them look at oscilloscopes a lot, and it blows their mind. So I guess as well, we're really concerned with who live codes. When I first started live coding regularly in 2014, I was one of 2 women coding on the scene. That sounds, coding on the scene, there we go. I said that. So in late 2015, I hosted with my close collaborator, Shelley Knotts, who's currently in Australia. We hosted a workshop at Huddersfield University as part of the Live Coding Research Network. I don't think I've got time to show a video, but there's a very nice video online of us looking. Well, actually, I'm just a bit of a goof, but I don't know, I get a bit overexcited in those sort of spaces. So we were looking at the idea of how live coding can create a space to fail in technologically, and that's something that should be celebrated, and it's something that is gendered. We had about 25 women come to our workshop, and out of that, it was really weird. Shelley did a keynote at the conference last week, and she showed a section of this video, and I hadn't watched it in a really long time because I come across as such a goof. But I saw these faces of people who are now my friends. And from this little tiny workshop that had a very minimal amount of funding, we've created a little scene in Yorkshire around live coding and coding practices and feminism. And you wanted to add something.
Yeah, because I teach on game design and I teach on digital art and technology, the courses are 90% men. And being able to show the girls who are in attendance that it's okay for a woman to fail, it's okay for a woman to fail in a male-orientated environment, because girls often don't want to show their technical work because they find it very stressful not appearing perfect in front of men, and that's something that's quite sort of part of female culture, unfortunately. So to be in an electronic music environment where you see women working with technology and coding, and in a supportive space where there's often, a large proportion of women there. We aim for 50-50, it's not always possible. But to see women crash and make mistakes and keep going is actually, I've found it's very powerful, especially with my students.
Yeah, we're trying to take coding to unexpected places and to people who normally, kind of outsiders to it. So I've done lots of work at the now Science and Media Museum in Bradford, working with children from schools in low socioeconomic areas and getting them having a go at making weird things with code. I've taken workshops to Pride in Nottingham, museums, and recently Women of the World Festival in Bradford. So we're trying to present code as something that isn't about creating a tool, but actually something that you can make an experience with, rather than solve a problem. I guess we're looking to create them. So at the moment, we're really actually, instead of just saying we're the future of dance music, we want to start thinking about algorithmic futures, different ways of doing and knowing with and through live coding. We're interested particularly in how it can be a medium for collaboration and form new practices. We're looking into the power of streaming and exploring how we can use different algorithms to achieve this. And I'll be demonstrating this later this evening. And did you want to say something about methods?
Yeah, I think, because I'm thinking about things, I suppose, in terms of my own artistic practice and I guess working with students, working with live, working with domes. And I think that thing about showing your workings and kind of unveiling what you're doing, and I'm really interested in kind of pushing that out of just a music background and into some other sort of cultural outputs as well.
So I'm going to quickly talk about some of the projects that are going on. So a lot of live coders are working with other humans and other computers. We have here Matthew Yee King at Goldsmiths University, who's performing with Alex McLean, who I've cut out the picture. He's been getting a lot of attention recently. And below that, we have Thor Magnusson from Sussex performing with Greta Ecott, a percussionist. And he's written a language to instruct a marimba player. So he's interested in live coding as a form of live scoring. So how can you use code to instruct a performer rather than a machine? Did you want to talk about the data projects as well next?
Yeah, so one thing we're able to do, and one way we find of, I guess, collaborating with institutions is projects that work with data. This image is actually collaborating with he's a tuba player and also a live coder. But it was actually one of Shelley's events in the University of Newcastle, and we were giving a load of biomedical data, and that was something we could sort of play with and jam with. So that visual's there, actually, me kind of in Touch Designer recreating protein structures out of data. We're also, myself and Joanne, our last sort of duet together was over at the British Library, working with some of the labs data, and hopefully later this year we're going to be working with the Jean Golding Institute. So it's just another way of, I guess, kind of engaging with other practices, with academia, with science and that kind of thing, and also working with institutions.
One of my collaborations, Algorabes, uses live sensor data. So we have a performance where we set up 2 things called babe nodes and make people dance for us. And that affects very lightly the activity in our music. We've recently developed another system where we can feel each other's stress and activity through haptics and sensor data. So we're interested in how we can reframe and look at our practice a bit differently by getting different information and data about it. I should talk quickly about OFFAL, which is the Orchestra for Females and at Laptops, which is a laptop orchestra for women and non-binary people. And this was formed in 2015 by Shelley Knotts and myself. And I think it changes, but there's about 15 women online. Today we'll be joined by people who are in Mexico and Colombia, and playing on our system Command Line, which is a democratic voting system where we can give each other instructions. I forget a lot of the instructions, so I just make everyone play noise. So we've travelled around a bit. We played in Rotterdam recently, and I guess we're really interested in how I can perform with strangers, people I haven't met. I met someone recently, last year, from the orchestra for the first time, and we shared a room for a week. It was really weird. Normally we just chat online. And we expose our chat so people can, so we have a constant dialogue with each other, debugging issues, generally moaning about things sometimes as well. And we expose that for the audience to listen to once we've censored out some of the more delicate elements. So we have a couple of systems that we employ, and we're interested in creating structures between us that are as democratic and non-hierarchical as possible. Another thing that we're kind of pushing in the new year that's kind of been going for a while is Orchestra, which is the streaming platform for Algorave. Algorave is full of terrible puns and acronyms. It wasn't supposed to do anything really, and all these awful names and ideas are now kind of surfacing in ways we didn't expect. So check us out on Orchestra. We're hoping to include artists that aren't just working with code, but working with algorithms in mechanical and other unexpected ways. And looking at the contact form, I think something's gone wrong with the font because it's taken...
I've disappeared completely.
It's taken Coral out. Shall I see if I can live code it?
I've gone into like a series of smiley faces. And you're really tiny.
We have the benefit of the real world in order to
yeah.
contact with you directly. So I'll urge you to go and non-technology.
Unless you have telepathy and you're able to know Coral's contact details, and you don't have razor sharp eyesight, so yeah, come and ask us questions. Thank you.